Hello and welcome. Thanks for clicking. I'm Eleanor and I'm starting a small business called The Strange Elephant, where I'll be selling my hand-embroidered patches. So today we will be making the first patch. So I'm using the People Watcher design that I was filming myself designing last video, I think. So before I started with any of the actual embroidering, I had to test the embroidery thread to make sure it would not bleed through the fabric. And well, for this design I am using black fabric, so it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be exclusively using black fabric, so I wanted to test that. So pretty much I'm just snipping off small sections of embroidery thread of random colors, and then pretty much just got them wet and put them on a piece of paper, and then tried to kind of mash it into the paper so it'd have as much contact with it as possible. And then I was just gonna see if it turned the paper any colors, which it did not, which was great. And for the black and green fabrics, they did bleed a little bit. It wasn't bad, but one of them was more expensive than the other one, and now I see why that one was more expensive, because I think it was the black one, but it didn't bleed quite it bled a little bit less than the green one. So I ended up ironed them the first time, and the iron that I'm using has a nice little squirty thing, so you can squirt water on it and then iron it, so that was nice. But then it ended up running out. I was in the middle of it and I went, oh, it'll be fine. It was not fine. By the end, I looked at all the ironing and it is still extremely wrinkly, so I went through the very hard process of putting a little more water in there and then ironing it again. And then after that, it looked nice and ironed, which was good. should have used a ruler for this. Like, it wasn't a big deal, just because it didn't have to be like completely straight. But I'm watching myself filming this again, and I'm thinking, geez, lady, use a ruler. You should use a ruler. There's a reason why they invented rulers. I'm a lefty, so I suffer from the curse of left-handedness, which is to say, when you try to cut something and then it does not always work, because scissors were not designed for left-handed people, so you gotta switch hands, which, I mean, it's a straight cut, so I didn't have too hard of a time cutting it once I switched hands. And also, these fabric scissors are a little bit dull, so they don't cut as well as they should. When we first got the scissors, they actually worked really nice, but now they're kind of dull, so they don't work as nice, and I have to use my right hand, otherwise it doesn't work. Here I make mistake number 2. My first mistake was not using a ruler. Second mistake, cutting off the corners. If you're going to make patches like this, do not cut off the corners, because once you try to fold it up, the corners look frayed, and that is not good. Learn from my mistakes. Don't cut corners. And also, cutting corners in this case takes more time and is a pain in the bum. So then came the extremely important task of picking out which shade of red I should use. So yeah, here's me comparing all of them and deciding which one I wanted to use. The last 2 ones I wasn't so sure on, look basically the same on camera. One was a little brighter than the other. And then came taking the thread out of the blob of embroidery thread, which sometimes it comes out nicely. Other times you get this, in which case it is a big tangled blob, which is kind of annoying, but whatever. Okay, I'm just separating the thread into 2 pieces. here's where I'm realizing that if you try to sew the edges of it when the edges are frayed, it does not work. And I tried just tucking it in, and that it doesn't, you can't just tuck it in and then sew and then call it a day. You have to actually put a stitch to hold it in. So in the end, that means the corners are quite unattractive. Okay, so I was embroidering this one and ended up cutting the corner off and then folding it off, so that meant that the edges they just looked frayed, so I had to fold them in, and then when I stitched them on, they wouldn't stay, so I had to put this stitch right here, and then I ended up stitching it, and then I didn't pre-draw my lines, and I was kind of going quickly, so then it looks very lopsided. And like as I was embroidering it, I didn't really register in my head as much as it should have that it was lopsided, but it was just kind of, there's just a bunch of pins in it, so the fabric was all bent up, so you couldn't really tell what it was supposed to look like. So now that I've taken all the pins out and actually finished the outline, it does not look good. So I have an idea already for how I'll do these corners. Instead of cutting the corners and then folding it in, I'm not going to cut the corners off. I'll just fold the corners off and then fold the edges in, and then that should fix the problem. The corners might be a little more bulky, but bulky corners are better than whatever you call this. And then like if it really doesn't work, I'll just do a whip stitch instead of the back stitch. I think I might try using a thinner thread, because for this one I took a piece of embroidery thread and split it off, so in here I got 3 strands. I might try doing it with 2 strands, just because it was honestly kind of hard to push the thread through there. Time to cut more fabric and sew that all again. So I pinned up both of them, and then I realized that I did not draw out the lines that I was going to be sewing on. So I unpinned it and did that. I'm very glad I did that because the lines turned out pretty nice and straight. right here you can see both of them together, and the new one looks a lot more polished. The lines are straight, the corners actually look like corners and less like blobs. And overall it just looks better. And I would say it also was easier to sew, so that was good as well. you have the finished patch, and I'm really excited and happy with how it turned out. The backside, of course, looks a little funny. Of course, because it's the backside, it always looks a little funny. The edges are good looking. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you have ideas on certain patches you want me to make, certain videos you want me to make, let me know. But yeah, enjoy the rest of your day or night or whatever time it is. So long, farewell, adieu to you.